I'm Denise.
I'm Katie.
I've been friends with Katie for over 20 years.
I cannot believe it's been 20 years.
This is
88 Chat,
where we talk about really random crap.
Advisory, disclaimer, this is just our opinion. Please don't take it as fact. Don't send hate to anybody. We want to love everybody.
Today's topic does include a trigger warning for DV. The more specific topic of today's episode is talking about
the defamation lawsuit between Johnny Depp and his ex-wife, Amber Heard. Johnny Depp is suing Amber Heard, saying she told lies about him. On record, on a article, an opinion piece. So if you guys didn't know, the case, the defamation case is starting this week. It's already started and testimony has already been given. At least for Johnny's side. I'm pretty sure we're going to hear about her side and her witnesses eventually. And then it's going to go on for 6 weeks. So I think this case is very important for a couple of reasons, just because most times we see these type of cases, especially when it involves DV or any types of toxic relationships. Usually the woman is the victim. Hardly ever do we see the man as the victim. And it's important to say because a lot of people don't think a man can be abused because they're a lot stronger and everything, have the macho ego, huge ego type thing. And that is just not true.
Obviously, we don't know how this case is going to go, and I kind of don't have high hopes, but I would hope that it would at least open the doorway for there to be more room for male victims. I feel like we talked about male victims in our toxic gender episode so long ago now, but it's obviously very relevant for that reason. I have never been a fan of hers. I honestly just don't like her that much from the vibe that I get from her personality. That doesn't mean that either of them can't be a victim, though.
So my stance on this, on the two people here, I'm not a fan of either one. I'm basically kind of the same thing as Drew, where they know of Johnny Depp, and they don't know anything about Amber, which is like once a huge A-list movie star, I'm gonna say a C-lister movie star, because she hasn't really done that many movies. I mean, Mira in Aquaman is, yeah, she has a huge role, I guess. I've never seen the movie, and I don't plan to.
Same.
But from what I hear, the acting wasn't that good. Johnny has had a repertoire of movies that we've seen, most notably Edward Scissorhands. Mm-hmm. A lot of things that involve Tim Burton, he's usually involved with.
Yes.
So he has had a long career in the entertainment industry. And Amber hasn't had that long of a career. So I think that's part of it. So I don't have any biases between either one. For me, what it comes down to is what are the facts, and what evidence is there. So my opinion on this is more for Johnny, because as we've seen this case go along in both the UK and in the US, we've seen more and more evidence that points to Amber being the aggressor and Johnny being not exactly a victim himself, because I don't think he sees himself. Based off today's testimony from the former therapist of theirs, Johnny has tried to de-escalate when they are fighting each other. And so I wouldn't say he is a victim. And I wouldn't say he's an abuser, because he's standing he's standing up for himself. Um, so I don't know what I would call him. I guess I would just call him human.
Right. It to me, it just comes across like that they just sort of grew to both hate each other, and things were bad in both directions.
Everybody knows marriage is a difficult thing, and also I think in what yesterday's testimony, his sister testified and saying like she advised him against getting married to her. She thinks it was too fast, too soon. It was just going. It's one of those things where you don't think before you do things, and then eventually you come to regret what you just did.
Yes, I feel like that. I hadn't heard that yet, but I feel like that really encapsulates parts of his personality that we've seen before. He was decades ago engaged to Winona Ryder, and while he was engaged to Winona Ryder, he got her name tattooed on his arm, so it said Winona forever. That relationship ended, and he had to have the tattoo partly removed, so it now says Wino forever, which isn't great. I think since then I've heard that it was either covered up or fully removed. I'm not sure, and it's not the point, but it just shows that he has a tendency to rush into relationships hot and heavy in that way of like, all right, let's do this, let's get married, I'm going to tattoo you on me, bing bang boom. And maybe he needs to practice slowing things down. There are obviously have been other relationships. The most recent prior to that marriage to Amber was a 10+ year relationship with the mother of his children, and she was one of the people who came out in his defense and said that he was just always a great partner and great to the kids. And I think even Winona had said the same thing, that they didn't work out, but that he was.
Yeah, that's the other thing that points to Amber being the aggressor, because she has a history of abusive relationship, and it's more her than the other person. Also, how she treats her family members is also a factor in there. So she does have aggression issues from the past, and it surely shows. Whereas Johnny Depp doesn't have that, and a lot of people are leaning like he doesn't have any priors, especially with all his other relationship. If he was in that category, it would have shown up. More people would have come forward, because as we've seen time and time again, when one person stands up, another one to follow, then another, and then another. It's like a domino effect. In this case, that didn't happen.
Yeah, that's what's very interesting. The only time that I really felt some concern that it was plausible was based on the fact that Johnny Depp was, maybe not still is, but was for quite a long time, good friends with Marilyn Manson, who also has had these kinds of cases coming out against him, and his seem extremely valid. And many people in Marilyn's case have come out of the woodwork since the first one. So when that first came to light, and Johnny's case was already kind of a thing, it was concerning, because it's like, these guys hang out, maybe there is something to this. But Marilyn's case continued to snowball and have people coming out in support of those women. And in Johnny's case, that didn't happen. Everything sort of stayed the same.
When it comes, speaking of consistency, his story has never changed. Hers has. That's one of the biggest things, especially because during the trial so far, she brought up new allegations. Her story keeps on changing, and usually in any case, that is never a good thing,
Right?
because that means there is inconsistency, and it puts doubts in the juror's mind. Because of that inconsistency, Johnny, like I said, Johnny's story has never changed. A lot of people are hoping for justice for Johnny, just because a lot of the evidence proved that's more her than him. But it's also showing, the reason why this case is so interesting is because it's showing the double standard that is in Hollywood. and in the country for that matter.
Yeah.
Because he lost major roles. Her major role is still there.
That was exactly what I was just thinking. Was I totally agree that it seems unfair. He lost work and she didn't. And as a side note, this is totally like off topic, but showing my slight bias here. There was a story about her having a special book bag during filming. Did you ever hear this?
I did not.
Okay, so when she was filming on Aquaman, she likes to read a lot, like constantly. And she said Jason Momoa did not like not getting attention, what she said. So he supposedly like ripped the pages out of some of her books. So she would hide her books. And so the prop people made a bag for her to wear that was made out of green screen material. So she would constantly have her books physically on her body while filming, while hanging in a harness. And then once they would cut, she would just take her book out of her green screen bag and go back to reading while still hanging on a harness. And I feel like when that news article fluff piece came out with that story, I think she said it at an interview on TV, and then they wrote an article about it. The intention of that comment was somewhat to bring Momoa down a peg. I get the sense that she's very high and mighty about the fact that she reads so much. You know what? Reading is great, but when you can clearly just type in her name and like reading on set, and tons and tons and tons of pictures come up of her in makeup with a book, whether she's sitting in a makeup chair, standing on set, no matter who else is around. And again, I want to champion reading because that's great. But if you're doing it to feel superior or to point out to people that they don't deserve your time, that's just like, it's a power move. It's trying to say, I'd rather be reading than giving you any attention, poking the bear in a way. And so he, acted out, and she got special treatment by having them go out of their way to make a green screen bag for her to keep her books instead of, because this is my thing. I'm the kind of person where if you're at work, you're at work. You do your job. That's what work is about. So if you are at work, yes, I know they have lots of breaks and downtime, and that's great. But if I'm at work, I'm there to do my job. So if I'm interacting with my coworkers or staff or whoever the heck is on these crews, then be there, be present, be at work. If the second they yell cut, you're ripping a book out of your pocket, you're not invested in work. You're not being involved in the project. So why would any future crews, any future coworkers want to work with you if you're not invested in the work that you're doing together? Because that is what I see when I see that. It's like, you could be practicing a scene, you could be rehearsing your lines. Maybe, yeah, you're in a harness 30 feet in the air, and that can be boring, especially if they make you hang out all day. But you're getting paid to do that. And asking for special treatment to have people go out of their way to accommodate your convenience at work, that just came off as like a diva move to me. So for me, that's like a point on his side that clearly that's just the type of personality that she has that rubs me the wrong way. So I could see someone else having issues with that. Not justifying any behavior in either side, but
so I have never seen any of her movies. I mean, I read that the chemistry between Jason Momoa and her weren't that good. And there is a special petition that people are saying to replace her, and they want to replace her with Emily Clark, who has worked with Jason Momoa a long time. They do have a lot of chemistry, as we've seen on Game of Thrones. And no, I have not watched that either.
Right.
The thing is, for me, is when you're like, I used to do when I was in high school and in elementary school, I did plays and everything and acting gigs. When you're acting, a lot of actors see acting as an art form. It takes time and practice to craft your art. If you are just reading a book during your downtime, that's fine. That's okay. You can relax. It helps relax your brain. It helps prevent burnout. But a lot of the criticism for her is that her acting is too stale. And if you are not practicing your art of acting and trying to do what the character you're paid to play, then yeah, that doesn't come off very well, especially for a lot of producers, because why would they want to do a movie with someone who well, unless you're sleeping with the producer or have some kind of relation, then yeah, there's a possibility there. But the thing is that you have to, considering how new she is to this industry and how she does not have the credibility for her, or the street credit for her acting, is never a good idea to do that. And also, going back to the trial yesterday, her assistant was on trial for Depp's side, and she said, like, she was also, when you're an employer, you have to respect your employees. And when I'm here, I mean, we have heard horror stories after horror stories about personal assistants being treated badly. And sadly, she is in that category of treating her employee badly. And the person that the assistant that was working for her, told her she had nothing bad to say about Depp, and that he was always kind to her. Even after she left, stopped working, Johnny did reach out to her and have a talk with her. So that also, like, I mean, that's also a point for Depp, because even the people that he employs, he is so professional. His manager is his sister. He didn't have to work with a sibling here, considering most of us would not work with our sibling because their driver was nuts half the time.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and the fact that it's his sister, and she knows him better, I think this goes a really good credibility towards him, just because his sister is a person he knows personally and has known him since the start of his life.
Yeah.
And so it is interesting to see everything play out. Like, we already have the eventually going to respect to all the evidence that we heard beforehand, including the cop cam, those are from the officers, the voice recordings, all the witnesses that was on Depp's side. And yes, it's gonna be a celeb fest, more huge celeb fest on Johnny Depp's side, just because he has been around longer, and more of a click for her witnesses, or entourage towards her. And like, especially because her stories don't add up, including those witnesses, because we already heard the stories from those witnesses from the UK. The other thing here that is actually really bad is because there's evidence from her side that has not been turned over. And they've been asking for it, and she still has not turned it over. If you have nothing to hide, then why are you hiding it? Why aren't you turning it over?
That's a good question. Why wouldn't they?
Yeah. So there's the other thing that is, again, most of the stuff is going to be plus Johnny, because a lot of the stuff is proving to Johnny's point. The other thing is that she has been trying to get this case dismissed from day one, the get-go. Each and every one of, okay, she's gone through a couple of attorneys, okay? Johnny has stuck with the same one. Basically, what they were doing was trying to throw things at the wall and see what sticks. And basically almost every single thing they tried has not stuck. So what, to me, like, that's the other question. Why do you want this to be over so quickly and using every tactic that isn't valid? And I'm pretty sure your lawyers know it isn't valid. Go for it. Like, what's the point? Why are you hiding? Is because it's going to damage your image even more, or prove more to the point of his.
That is an interesting point. I hadn't heard that before, but that does make sense, that people who are more difficult to work with are more likely to run through counsel than
Yeah.
someone else. So that definitely does put a point on his side that at the very least, regardless of the case, at least he must be tolerable to work with for his lawyer to stick through all of this. And I am also bothered because she immediately jumped into, I'm going to support the cause for other women, and it's great to support the cause, but when your cases are still ongoing and you're sort of putting yourself like, I'm going to be the spokesperson now,
that's the other thing. According to the divorce agreement, she was supposed to donate her divorce settlement money to 2 causes.
mm-hmm.
One of the causes is the ACLU, and I think the Children's Hospital or something like that. The second charity only got 1 payment, and that was the payment from when he made it on her behalf. She went to the judge and said, no, he has to give it to me directly. After that, they have not seen a cent. And the reason why they are bringing the Depp side is bringing this up is because it goes to her credibility.
Right.
Because if you don't have credibility in a case, it makes it a lot more difficult for you to win a case. And just because I don't think people understand what defamation is, just because someone doesn't name you by name, if it's heavily implied, then yeah. Especially because if people can make, based off the article, if a person who doesn't know who you are can make the jump of who you're talking about, that is implying that person, and what you're saying about that person is either true or untrue.
And I think that, in my mind, if someone's saying defamation, the linchpin of that is that it's damaging in some way. So what she did was damaging to his career, and we have evidence of that. What his lawyer said hasn't really damaged her career in any way. So that's where I feel like it is even less credible, because it hasn't really defamed her much. It seems like public opinion at this point, at the time of her filing it, it hasn't really.
The lawsuit, because attorneys have to go through amendments to amend things if they see they have to go a different way, and in this case, it's I'm not gonna lie, Amber's attorney has a very uphill battle, and also it's what she's saying in the article was true, so therefore it's not defamation, because she did turn in a police report, and all that stuff. It's like, no, that part, yeah, just because one part of the article is true doesn't mean the rest of it is, and that's the main point. Like, the rest of the article isn't true. I forgot what the other stuff is in the article. I can't remember. I need to reread it. But it is referencing their relationship during their marriage. Although I think the other thing is that I don't think she was supposed to say anything about their relationship. And due to the divorce agreement, I don't know if there was a statute of limitation in that divorce agreement, or whether or not they can talk about their relationship. And so there's that. And they said that when the article was written, she brought it to her attorney, and they said it was okay. I think they forgot to see whether or not it applied, or if it could be seen, because the question is whether or not it's protected because of the opinion piece. But also, when you're saying an opinion, most of the stuff that you say has to be true. And you can have opinion about a lot of things, and you won't get thrown in jail for it. But when it's pertaining to certain situation that isn't clear or true, then you can say defamation of character, because that does not reach the characteristic of the person that you're talking about. In defamation lawsuit, as long as you don't have to say the person's name, as long as it's heavily implied, and also what situation you're talking about, and specifically if there isn't that many people involved in that very situation, you can automatically know who it's about.
Yeah.
And so it's the balancing of justice is more kind of leaning away towards Johnny's side a little bit. And let's not forget, public opinion doesn't count. The courts do not care about your public opinion.
Yeah.
And so the court will rule however it wants to rule, at least according to the jury. So, I mean, I would love to be a fly on the wall and be on that jury to hear everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, it's based off the facts alone from what I'm reading, what I'm seeing. It doesn't look good for Heard, especially for their team, because one of Johnny Depp's friend and neighbor, like this guy has a hugest Boston accent I ever heard. And they spent 30 minutes asking him about makeup, whether or not there was a shiner or if there was makeup on her to cover up bruise. This guy, I mean, it more proves to his point, because the guy says, like, I want this to be over. I don't want people to go in this anymore. What she done isn't fair to my friend. How she got so many people involved in this is not right. What she did to him. But I'd rather have her go her way, he goes his way, and not involve each other.
Yeah. Yeah, that should have happened from the very beginning, for sure.
Yeah. And like I said, like it get just jumped at, like, life is short, and maybe he rushed things, and maybe he is searching for something, especially because his sister mentioned that the name calling from Amber is a reflection of how his mother would do that to him. And remember, people, like, I know they'll say stick and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me. I'm sorry, that is not true. Words can hurt, and hurt very deeply.
Yes,
All of us
especially
will know.
when it's in like a childhood situation.
Yeah.
And
So
that is very relevant as well, because his mother passed right around the time that their relationship was kind of starting out. And that was very publicly was difficult for him. And so, having lost parents, we can both relate to the mental toll that all of that grieving brings, especially when you may have an unhealthy relationship with that parent. You have to grapple with a lot of different feelings, all of the positives and negatives. And so to be in a volatile relationship while also going through all of that process, it's a lot easier to fall into victimhood and fall into those old habits, because everything's kind of brought to the surface and it's raw, and it's having be in the throes of grief, and then have someone verbally messing with you and calling you names. And he has always been a pretty, I don't want to say mellow, because personality wise, I feel like, he's not necessarily mellow, but he's been quiet, and so it comes across as like a soft spoken.
The other thing that her team is trying to allude to is, a lot of times when we hear stories of an abusive person, then usually are drunk or there is substance abuse, but that isn't always the case. There isn't a correlation between those things and that. So they're trying to prove that because he's a drug addict and drunk, he was aggressive. Um, but then to that point, kind of that point, we all known he was doing drugs.
Right.
And right before, like we've seen him do drugs, drink way before her.
Yeah.
So, and if there isn't a history of violence, even and of violence, including where there is drug and alcohol involved, the likelihood that is a cause and would make someone be extremely aggressive towards the other one or try to charge somebody is highly unlikely, especially when there is already history behind that. Like I see what they're trying to do, but at the same time, I don't think that's gonna work because y'all know that he already had a history before her.
Yes, absolutely. I think I hadn't put it in that context before, but that is a good point because I recently saw a clip of him on some late night talk show. It's not a new clip, but I just recently saw it talking about when he was filming, I believe it was Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, hoping I'm not getting my movies mixed up in my brain. And in prep for that movie, he spent some time with the author of the novel, Hunter Thompson, who is notoriously eccentric. So just the fact that you were associating with Hunter Thompson implies some drug use there, as well as it being relevant to the character in the story that became the movie. That character totally trips out in the movie. That's actually where I stopped watching the movie in high school, rented it once for like a sleepover or something, and got to one of those scenes where his character's freaking out in a hotel room, and we just said, this is too weird, and turned it off, never saw the ending. And that was, as well as a very long-standing history, because he's an owner, or at least was owner, of the Viper Room in California, and the tragic loss of Joaquin Phoenix's brother River at that very club from an overdose. And so drug use has heavily impacted Johnny's life over the years.
And then also there's a text message that he's where like we all have had angry texts where we're talking about somebody that we're not liking because they have pushed our buttons too far.
Yeah. I was thinking that same thing about those texts, that yes, they do look bad, but yeah, we've all got somebody that we vent to, and that doesn't mean that you're serious. You're just like, especially if someone is berating you and calling you names and treating you bad in person, and you feel like you're powerless, that you can't stand up for yourself, what do? You text somebody and you blow off some steam silently.
Yeah, and it is those texts, like in context, it's just like because like all of us have had a situation where we're just like they piss us off to the point of no return. As long as those words don't become actions, then yeah, it's just words, just angry venting words.
Yeah.
And there's also another text from his sister, stop with the pills and drinking, but then that's because that's his sister and his manager.
Yeah.
Hey, lay off the booze and the drugs. You can do it a little bit later, but just lay it off. You're going to a little bit too far there.
Yeah, and he's done tours with bands and stuff, and that there's a very specific context when you're working in that type of industry, where those substances are everywhere.
So like I said, when it comes to this case, it's more Johnny's side than Amber's side. Just because I haven't heard a lot of defense for her. It's going to be very interesting. I'm pretty sure we're going to touch this topic again, maybe probably after the trial and what the judge decide. But I will be following up closely with it, just because it's going to be it's one of those cases where you can't take your eyes off it because it's so interesting and there's so much detail that's going to come into play.
Can I bring up the dog thing?
Oh yeah, I think she's not banned from Australia.
Well, just the whole situation when it happened, her smuggling in the dogs, and then the apology video. I just watched it before we started this because I'd seen it when it first came out, but it's been so long, and it's painful, of course. That video, first of all, neither one of them wants to be there. there's no emotional investment in doing that, and they're obviously reading off of a screen. But the thing that I found really interesting as just a choice that they left it in the video for whoever was editing it, they're taking turns saying I'm sorry and blah blah blah, and you could see the tension in the relationship already in that video, because they're both like, oh, Australia's so great, this is why we need to do this, we are so sorry. And then she finishes her line, and he says something that was clearly pointed and sarcastic, like he's saying, ugh, I'm rolling my eyes, this is a stupid kind of comment, but with polite words. Like, you could just tell he was pissed and sneaking it in. And then she turns and gives him the side eye of like, shut your dang mouth. And they left it in the apology video. So to me, the fact that their clear tension was there, that they couldn't even get along long enough for the 2-minute apology video, it was kind of no surprise the way that things went from there. And not to just jump, that I have the feeling that you're wanting to wrap things up, so I gotta cram it all in before we have to go. Didn't I read at one point that her previous unhealthy relationship, she was the aggressor, that a
Yes.
female partner had
it is on record that she got arrested for DV in her previous relationship. A lot of people are bringing that up because it shows a history of aggressive behavior and violence. And a lot of people use her past as a predictor of your future, unless there is changes that you have made in between one incident to another that says that you have changed and this is a one-off incident. But in this case, there is that isn't the case because of her previous relationship and also her relationship to her family and also to people she works with. It proves the pattern behavior, and that's why the history of her DV relationship previously is affecting this one, because the history is there and it does connect, because there isn't that lapse of time where there is a change. Her thought process is clear here because there is on record a video or audio where she says that she's gonna do this and no one's gonna believe him because she's using her gender as a way to prove her point. And I'm gonna leave my final thoughts on this because we're gonna probably come back to this case again when it's ending, because then we'll have more information and talk about that. But my final thoughts is it's gonna be an interesting case. My judgment so far, it's gonna be for Johnny. I think he will come up on top versus her. So I just want to see how everything goes, but based off the information I've seen, and because for me, I have to look at everything before I make a final judgment. But based off information that I have from the case and from the previous, more than likely, it's for me, it's a win for Johnny.
I agree with all of that assessment, that I think that all of the evidence that we've seen so far points for him in his benefit. However, for some reason that I can't put my finger on, I still feel like she's going to win. I don't think that she should. So I just have this sense that it's not going to go his way regardless. I hope that I'm wrong, but that's just sort of how I can imagine it going.
I think a lot of people think that there's a possibility of that going due to the UK case.
Yeah.
And more than likely, they're like thinking like, well, that's the other question that a lot of people are asking. Is it going to go the same way as the UK case? So, like I said, it's going to be interesting to see. We'll probably touch back on it in 6 weeks, because that's how long this trial is going to last. So in 6 weeks, we're probably going to be touching on this topic. So in 2 months, we're going to be touching back on this topic.
Perfect.
So we're gonna talk to you in 6 weeks upon this topic. But don't forget to hit the like button, and we will talk to you later upon a new subject.
Speaking of new subjects, we previously had an episode about the Britney Spears conservatorship, and so now there is new news that we may have to discuss in another episode, that Ms. Spears is expecting a baby, so that may be a topic for future discussion.
Thanks for watching this episode of 88 Chat. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment.
No. Bark. No.